At 32, I'd learned to smile through pity. My name's Alyssa Monroe. I'm a high school art teacher in Portland. My younger sister, Chloe, has the husband, the house, the 2 perfect kids, and a tongue sharp enough to slice glass. Every family dinner, she reminds me. No ring, no crib, no success. Last week was my birthday. I told everyone not to make a fuss, but Chloe planned a little surprise at Mom's house, a full party where I was the punchline. Balloons that said forever single, a cake with 1 candle, and just when the laughter got too loud, the front door opened. Everyone froze. The man who walked in wasn't just anyone. He was the one person my family thought would never stand beside me, Ethan Cross, the CEO, Chloe husband who had worked for. The same man who once fired her husband for fraud. When his eyes met mine, Chloe's smirk disappeared. That was the night my quiet life stopped being something to mock and started being something to fear. If this story caught your heart, make sure to hit subscribe so we keep bringing you stories that dig deep into truth, guilt, and redemption. And don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We read them all and your words keep us going. They spelled my name wrong on the cake on purpose. I stood there staring at it. Bright pink frosting letters that said Alicia. Chloe grinned from across the room, glass of champagne in her hand, like she was hosting an awards show. My own birthday, and somehow she was the star. The dining room smelled like cheap vanilla candles and expensive perfume. Every guest was from her world. Picture-perfect moms with diamond rings, whispering like I was some kind of museum exhibit. My mom laughed along with them, too nervous to stop it, too used to pretending nothing was wrong. I tried to smile. It's what I always pretended didn't hurt. Pretend the jokes didn't land like knives. I told myself, you're 32, an adult, not that same girl who used to cry when Chloe hid your art projects. But standing there with a cake that mocked my name and a single candle glowing like pity, I felt 12 again. Chloe clinked her glass. Time for speeches. She started talking about how some people find happiness early and how others take longer. But that's okay. Everyone laughed at the fake sympathy dripping from her voice. She looked right at me when she said, "At least you have your students." That was her favorite jab. She teaches art, she sells houses. She thinks she won life because someone put a ring on her finger. When they started chanting, "Blow the candle, Alicia," my chest tightened. I leaned forward, pretending to laugh, but my hands were shaking. For a second I thought about walking out, leaving the cake, the candles, the humiliation, but that would just prove them right, wouldn't it, that I couldn't take a joke. I blew out the candle. A cheer went up, hollow and loud. Someone yelled, "Make a wish!" I almost said it out loud. I wish I had never had to sit through this again. Mom hugged me afterward, quick and awkward, whispering that Chloe just wanted to lighten the mood. Her voice cracked on the word lighten, like she knew exactly how cruel it was. I wanted to tell her it was okay. I always wanted to make her feel less guilty for choosing Chloe's side. So I smiled again. That tired, polite smile people wear when they've stopped believing kindness will help. My throat ached from holding everything in. The shame, the anger, the years of being the family joke. Then, just as I was about to escape to the kitchen, the doorbell rang. It was sharp, unexpected, cutting through the laughter like a warning bell. Everyone went silent for the first time that night. Mom frowned. Chloe glanced toward the hallway, annoyed that someone dared interrupt her show. I turned to look at the front door, half curious, half desperate for any distraction. The laughter faded completely. The only sound left was the ticking of the wall clock. And then the door slowly opened. The last person I expected to see was holding a gift with my name on it. Ethan Cross. He stepped into the doorway like he owned the air in the room. Tall, calm, dressed in a charcoal suit that didn't belong anywhere near my mother's floral wallpaper. His presence drained the laughter from the party faster than a blown fuse. Every head turned. Even Chloe's voice died mid-sentence. He looked right at me. That small, polite half-smile that powerful men wear when they know they've just shifted the energy of a room. My name was written neatly on the silver-wrapped box in his hands. Chloe's husband Grant went pale. His jaw twitched, eyes darting toward the floor. I caught it instantly, that flicker of recognition mixed with fear. I'd seen that look before, back when our neighbor's dog used to hide before getting scolded. Ethan walked closer. The sound of his shoes on the hardwood was louder than the music. I felt my pulse rise. I hadn't seen him since the community art fair last year, when he'd quietly funded our mural program without ever wanting credit. We'd spoken once, just small talk about color theory, and how kids paint more bravely than adults. That was it. So why was he here at my birthday, surrounded by people who thought I was a failure? He handed me the box. His voice was steady, measured, but softer than I remembered. For you, Alyssa. My hands trembled slightly as I took it. It was heavier than it looked, wrapped perfectly, not like something from a store, but something intentional. Mom tried to break the tension, asking how he knew me. He said we met through school projects. Nothing more, but the way he said it, the pause after, told a different story. Like there was something else he wasn't ready to say in front of everyone. Chloe forced a laugh, too high-pitched to sound natural. She wrapped her arm around Grant and said something about how it's nice when people remember teachers. Grant's hand was gripping his glass so tight I thought it might crack. The silence grew awkward. I could feel everyone's eyes bouncing between us, trying to piece together a connection that didn't make sense. Ethan looked around once, then at me again, and said he'd just stopped by briefly. His tone was polite but firm, the kind that leaves no room for questions. He wished me a happy birthday, nodded at my mom, and stepped toward the back door that led to the patio. Without thinking, I followed. Something about his calm felt urgent, like a storm sitting just behind his eyes. Outside, the air was cooler, damp with the smell of rain. He turned to face me. For a moment, he said nothing. Just looked at me, the kind of look that makes you feel like you've missed a piece of your own story. Then his voice dropped low enough for only me to hear. We need to talk alone. He slid an envelope across the patio table like it carried explosives. The silver wrapping paper from the gift box was still crumpled between us. Inside, it had only been this, a plain white envelope with my name written in clean, confident handwriting. No card, no decoration, no clue. Just my name. Ethan sat across from me, posture straight, expression unreadable. The faint glow from the string lights overhead made him look almost unreal, like he didn't belong in my ordinary life. I stared at the envelope. My fingers hesitated before touching it. What is this? I asked quietly. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. It's something your father left behind. It was supposed to reach you years ago. My breath caught. My father had been gone for over a decade. I was 17 when he died. Mom always said there wasn't much left except debt and bad investments. She said we were lucky to keep the house. I tore the seal open slowly. Inside was a single-page letter printed on legal stationery. The name at the top made my chest tighten. Jameson and Klein Estate Counsel. My father's old lawyer. The letter stated that Alyssa Monroe was the registered but uncontacted beneficiary of unclaimed shares in a company called Monroe and Cross Holdings. Pending claimant verification. Assets remained in trust. I reread it 3 times, each word cutting deeper. Unclaimed shares. Monroe and Cross, my father's name. Ethan's last name. I looked up at him. Your Cross, as in that cross. He nodded once, slow and heavy. Our fathers were partners, before things went wrong. I didn't even know what to ask first. My father was a high school art teacher before starting a small business that failed. At least that's what Mom always said. She told me he trusted the wrong people, that he died broke and heartbroken. But Ethan's expression said something else. Your dad wasn't broke, he said quietly. He was erased. My father and yours built a real estate firm that took off fast. Then something happened. Paperwork, accusations, a scandal that never reached the news. My father took the blame, but the company disappeared overnight. He paused, watching my face. And I've spent years trying to understand why. The night air felt colder suddenly. I could hear laughter faintly inside the house. Chloe's voice echoing through the open window. The same voice that mocked me every holiday. If what Ethan was saying was true, that meant my family had hidden something massive. I looked down at the letter again, my hands shaking. Unclaimed shares, trust, beneficiary. Words that sounded too big for the life I'd lived. Why are you showing me this? I whispered. Because, he said, your father wasn't the only one betrayed. He stood, slipping his hands into his pockets, eyes locked on mine. You're about to learn why your sister wanted you forgotten. My dad's handwriting looked shaky, almost like he'd been forced. The ink bled slightly where his pen must have paused too long. I traced the letters with my finger, heart thudding. His name, Daniel Monroe, sat beside a date that didn't make sense. 2 weeks after his death, Ethan and I sat in his office the next afternoon, papers spread across the desk like ghosts of the past. He'd pulled the documents from his firm's archives, dusty folders marked Monroe and Cross Holdings, dissolution and estate transfer. I could smell old paper and faint coffee in the room. Everything looked so organized, so calm, yet every page I touched made my chest feel heavier. Ethan pointed at the bottom corner of one file. There. Your father's signature again. But look at this. Next to it, 2 more signatures. Linda Monroe, Chloe Bennett, my mother and sister. I froze. My throat went dry. These were amendment papers, changes made to my father's estate after his death, a reallocation of assets. My name wasn't listed anywhere. Mom had told me the estate was too small to bother with, that there was nothing left to inherit. I'd believed her, because why would a mother lie about something like that? Betrayal doesn't come all at once. It seeps in quietly, like water under a locked door. The moment I saw Chloe's name next to Mom's, something inside me cracked open. All those years of family jokes, all the little digs, all the pity, they weren't about my choices. They were about what I didn't know. Ethan leaned over the desk, his brow furrowed. There's more. He flipped through another set of pages. The first one was missing. What do you mean by missing? This binder is numbered. Page 1, 2, 3, and then 5. Page 4 isn't here. It's labeled in the index. Monroe Trust. Beneficiary A. Beneficiary A. The words hit me like a physical blow. He turned his laptop toward me, pulling up a scanned index file. The digital record stopped right at that missing page. If there was a beneficiary A, I said, then there must have been a B. Ethan nodded slowly, and whoever signed this amendment wanted the A to disappear. The office felt colder. My skin prickled. For a second, I imagined my dad sitting here years ago, pen in hand, trusting the same people who would erase his daughter from his will. I asked Ethan if he thought my mom knew what she'd done. He sighed. Sometimes people do terrible things and convince themselves it's for family peace. I couldn't breathe. The room spun slightly, the floor creaking beneath my chair. All the family dinners, the quiet guilt in Mom's eyes, Chloe's smugness, it all connected. I whispered, "They stole it from me." Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence between us was confirmation enough. Then he turned the final page. A sticky note was still attached to the corner, faded, almost unreadable, but the words sent chills through me. Keep file safe until final release. Final release of what? I asked. He looked up, his expression darkening. Whatever it was, it's on the missing page. The A stood for me, and I never knew. That night, I drove to my mother's house with the missing documents trembling in my hands. The porch light flickered like it always did, a tired bulb that refused to die. Inside, the air smelled like lemon cleaner and denial. Mom was sitting at the kitchen table in her robe, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smiled the way people do when they know something is about to break. I dropped the folder on the table. The papers fanned out like an accusation. She didn't ask where I got them. She didn't even pretend to be surprised. I asked her straight. Why were Chloe's and her signatures on the amendments after Dad's death? Why was there a missing page labeled Beneficiary A? Her hands trembled as she reached for the folder, then stopped midway. She stared at it, then at me. Her voice came out small, cracked. It was to keep the peace, Alyssa. That's all. Keep peace. 2 words that felt like a knife twisting under my ribs. I told her I'd seen the handwriting. Dad's signature looked forced. I told her Ethan found evidence that the trust still existed. She closed her eyes like the truth was too bright to look at. He wanted you to have it, she whispered. But Chloe and Grant were already struggling. Your father didn't want the family torn apart after he died. I just helped keep it that way. Helped. That was her word for theft. My head pounded. I'd spent years thinking I was the unlucky one, the failure, the extra wheel of the family. But the truth was worse. I'd been erased on purpose. I said, you let her mock me. You let her humiliate me. For years. And you just watched. Her eyes filled with tears. She reached for me, but I stepped back. She said, I thought it was better this way. You didn't need that money. You had a good job. A good heart. I laughed, a sound that didn't even sound human. That's what you tell yourself when you betray someone you love. She stood and went to a drawer near the sink, pulling out a small torn note. Half of it was missing, the edges ragged. She laid it down carefully in front of me. Your father wrote this before he died, she said. It was part of the will papers. The note was in Dad's handwriting, rough but familiar. The visible words said, if anything happens, Alyssa must receive. Then it ended mid-sentence, where the page was torn. "Must receive what?" I demanded. Mom's voice dropped to a whisper. There was more to it, something I didn't understand back then. I could feel my pulse in my neck. I wanted to scream, but fear held me still. She finally looked up, eyes red and glistening, voice shaking so hard it barely carried across the room. "It wasn't just about money, Alyssa." Her next words came out like a confession she'd buried for decades. "It was about who your father really was." Behind Dad's painting was a key taped to the frame. I found it by accident 2 days later. The portrait had always hung in the hallway, my father in his workshop, brush in hand, that same warm smile that made me forget how cold our house could feel after he died. I was dusting the frame when my fingers caught on something rough behind the canvas, a small strip of black tape. Beneath it, a brass key, old and scratched, with a metal tag stamped M&C Storage 1 and 12. My hands shook. My father's initials, Monroe and Cross. The same names from the documents Ethan showed me. I called him immediately. He didn't sound surprised. More like someone who'd been waiting for this moment. He said he'd meet me there in an hour. The storage facility sat on the edge of downtown, the kind of place people used to bury memories they couldn't burn. Rows of metal doors under flickering fluorescent lights. I held the key tight in my palm, its edges biting into my skin. Ethan was already there, leaning against his car. He looked different in the daylight, less like the powerful CEO everyone feared, more like a man still chasing ghosts. He didn't say much, just nodded toward the unit. The lock clicked open with a sound that made my stomach twist. When the metal door rolled up, dust spilled into the air like smoke. Inside, a single wooden box sat in the center, covered with an old drop cloth. Everything else empty. Ethan helped me pull the box forward. My heart thudded as I lifted the lid. Inside were folders, letters, and a few personal items. A watch, a set of cufflinks, and a sealed envelope with my father's handwriting. But the first thing that if found, delivered to my daughter and to the son of Cross. Our fathers built an empire together and destroyed it with one signature. Ethan sat across from me in the coffee shop near the river, the envelope from the storage locker lying open between us. The photo, the documents, the letter, all pieces of a puzzle that felt like it was rearranging my entire life. He rubbed a hand over his jaw, eyes fixed on the letter. His voice was low when he finally spoke. My father didn't steal a dime, Alyssa. He was framed. The world around me seemed to go quiet. I stared at him, waiting for the part where he'd say he wasn't sure. But he didn't. He had proof. The financial statements, the signed transfers, the fake audit reports. All of them had one thing in common. Grant Bennett, Chloe's husband. Ethan laid the papers out in order. Your brother-in-law was working under my father back then. He moved money into offshore accounts using company funds. When the board found out, they pinned it on my dad to save their image. The evidence was planted. Your father tried to fight it, but before he could, he died. Suddenly and quietly, my hands were trembling. Grant had always bragged about building everything from nothing. But now I saw what that nothing really means. Stolen foundations, ruined lives, rewritten stories. So you're saying my father took the fall to protect him, I said. Ethan nodded. Not just him. Chloe, too. She married Grant right after your father's death. The timing wasn't a coincidence. It was a strategy. I felt sick. The laughter from my birthday replayed in my mind. That fake smile, her cruel voice telling me I had nothing. And all along, she was standing on the ashes of what should have been mine. I didn't even know what to feel first. Shock that it was true. Guilt that I'd ever envied her. Anger that my family had let me believe I was less than them. Ethan leaned closer, voice steady. They kept you small on purpose. It's easier to hide corruption when the quiet ones stop asking questions. The truth cut deep, sharp, and clean. All those years of trying to earn their approval. Worthless. I'd been fighting for a seat at a table that was built on lies. I stared out the window. The river outside moved slowly, reflecting gray clouds that looked like bruises. My chest felt hollow. What happens now? I asked. Ethan's phone buzzed on the table. He frowned, picked it up, and his expression changed instantly. All the calm in his face drained away. He turned the screen toward me. A text message. No number, no name. Just words. Stop digging or she'll lose more than money. For a second, I didn't breathe. The coffee shop noise blurred out. Only the weight of those words remained. I looked at him, my heart hammering. She'll lose more than money. Who's she? I whispered. Ethan's voice was tight, controlled, but I saw the panic behind his eyes. You, Alyssa. They mean you. Threats don't scare me, but they terrified Mom. The first one came through text the morning after the coffee shop meeting. A blocked number. 2 words. Stop asking. I deleted it without replying, told myself it was spam. But by nightfall, the locks on my apartment door were splintered, and every drawer had been turned inside out. The documents are gone. The copies of the trust, the letter from the lawyer, everything Ethan had helped me gather. Only one thing was left untouched on my shelf. A framed photo of me and my dad, taken when I was 12. The glass was cracked straight through our faces. I picked it up carefully, cutting my thumb on the broken edge. Blood dotted the wood frame. It felt symbolic in the worst way. Truth shatters illusions. Mom came over after I called the police. She looked smaller than I remembered, wrapped in her old cardigan, eyes darting around like the shadows could swallow her. When she saw the broken frame, she gasped, hand over her mouth. This is what happens when you dig too deep, Alyssa, she whispered. Some things are better left buried. But I wasn't that quiet girl anymore. I told her it was already too late. Whoever wanted me silent had just made sure I'd never stop. Ethan showed up minutes later, jaw tight, eyes scanning the mess. He moved through the apartment like a detective, noticing details I'd missed. No forced entry on the windows, only the lock. Professional. They knew exactly what to take, he said. The police wrote a report, but I could tell they didn't care. To them, it was just another break-in. To me, it was proof that someone out there was desperate to erase my father's truth again. Mom sat on the couch, clutching her purse like it could protect her. She looked at Ethan and said, "You're putting her in danger." Ethan's tone softened. "I'm trying to protect her, Mrs. Monroe. That's why I'm not leaving her alone anymore." Mom didn't argue. She just stared at the floor, silent tears dripping onto her lap. After she left, I cleaned up in silence. The cracked glass photo lay on the counter, catching the light in sharp little reflections. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. It felt like a warning and a promise. Ethan set up his laptop, pulled footage from the building's security cameras. We sat side by side as grainy images flickered across the screen. For a long time, nothing. Just headlights passing by, random tenants coming and going. Then at 11:47 p.m., a car stopped outside my building. The camera caught a clear shot of the license plate before the headlights turned off. Ethan zoomed in, eyes narrowing. He froze the frame and turned the laptop toward me. The letters and numbers came into focus, and my stomach dropped. I recognized that plate immediately. It was Grant's car, Chloe's husband. Ethan leaned back slowly, voice low and certain. Now we know who's afraid of the truth. Mom wanted a family talk, but it felt like a funeral. She called that morning, her voice trembling like she was holding back more than words. She said everyone needed to be there. Me, Chloe, Grant, and even Ethan. She didn't say why, just that it was time to stop the fighting. I almost didn't go, but Ethan insisted. He said truth only hurts when it's half told. The house smelled like cinnamon and guilt. Chloe was already there, pacing by the window in her designer heels, arms folded, eyes sharp as broken glass. Grant sat stiff on the couch, pretending to check emails, but his leg wouldn't stop shaking. Mom hovered near the dining table like a referee too scared to blow the whistle. When Ethan and I walked in, every head turned. The silence stretched until I felt it pressing on my chest. I set a folder on the table. Inside were the backup copies I'd kept hidden from the apartment break-in. Ethan helped me digitize everything. The original trust, the amended pages, and the scanned signatures. Chloe's smile was thin and venomous. "So this is the show? You brought your little hero to save you?" I looked her straight in the eye. "No, I brought the truth." Her laugh cracked the tension for half a second. "You always were dramatic, Alyssa. You can't stand that someone else did better than you." "Better?" I said quietly. "Is that what you call stealing?" Grant shifted in his seat, color draining from his face. Chloe snapped at me to stop being ridiculous, but Ethan spoke before I could answer. He opened his laptop and projected the bank transfers on the TV screen. Each transaction showed a familiar name, Daniel Monroe, my father's signature authorizing money that had vanished years ago. Ethan zoomed in on the electronic signature line. "Look closely," he said. "This isn't Daniel Monroe's signature. It's a digital overlay copied from older documents." Chloe frowned. "What are you talking about?" Ethan's tone was calm, surgical. "Grant used a scanned version of your father's handwriting to move funds under a shell account registered to his company. We verified it through the timestamp data. Grant's jaw locked. That's absurd, he said, his voice breaking on the last word. I stepped closer, my voice steady for the first time in years. I used to wonder why Dad's name disappeared from everything, why his memory made you two so nervous. Now I know, because it wasn't grief. It was guilt. Mom began to cry, clutching the edge of the table. Chloe's voice rose, sharp and desperate. You don't know what you're talking about. You're jealous. You always have been. I felt something inside me harden, a quiet kind of courage I'd never felt before. No, Chloe, I'm just done pretending that peace means silence. Ethan clicked to the next image, a digital forensic report, highlighted in red. He looked at Grant and said softly, You forged every transfer under her father's name. Grant's hand slammed the table. The laptop screen flickered. Mom gasped. Chloe turned pale, and I just stood there, realizing the funeral I'd walked into wasn't for peace. It was for their lies. Numbers don't lie, but family does. The next morning, Ethan and I sat in his office again, this time surrounded by cold proof. The kind that doesn't care about feelings or excuses. Bank records, archived statements, wire histories leading back to one thing, a hidden trust account in my father's name. The total stared up at me from the screen. $1.7 million. My breath caught. The trust had been opened 18 years ago, the same year my father died. The beneficiary field read Alyssa Monroe Education Fund. It wasn't an inheritance. It was supposed to secure my future, a start in life, except that the account was emptied 5 years later, transferred to a corporate entity managed by Grant Bennett, my sister's husband. I pushed back from the desk, my pulse hammering in my ears. My father's dream had been turned into their safety net, my life traded for their comfort. Ethan didn't speak. He knew there was nothing to say that wouldn't sound hollow. The quiet between us felt like mourning. Not for money, but for every year I'd spent believing we were just a struggling family doing our best. I scrolled through the transactions again. Grant had withdrawn small amounts at first, almost carefully. Then, larger sums, vacation homes, business capital, and luxury cars. Each one was labeled as authorized reallocation. My name was nowhere. Tears blurred the screen. I wiped them away before they could fall. I hated crying in front of anyone, even Ethan. But this time it wasn't sadness. It was released, a strange, painful kind of freedom. For once, the truth didn't make me weaker. It made me lighter. Ethan leaned forward, his voice steady. You can go public with this, Alyssa. You'd win everything back. I shook my head. Winning wasn't what I wanted. I wanted them to see, to feel what it's like to be small, invisible, disposable. That evening, I drove back to Mom's house. The same porch light flickered as always. Chloe's car was in the driveway. They were both waiting inside, pretending not to expect me. I placed the printed bank records on the table between us. Dad left this for me, I said. Not for you, not for Grant, for me. Chloe tried to laugh it off, said I was twisting things, but her voice cracked halfway through. Mom's hands shook as she flipped through the pages. Her face drained of color. You knew, didn't you? I said softly. You knew there was more than what you told me. She didn't answer, just stared at the numbers like they were written in another language. I pressed harder. Where's the rest of it, Mom? Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I asked again, louder this time. Where's the rest of it? Her hand trembled. The papers slipped from her fingers and scattered across the floor. She swayed, her eyes wide with something between guilt and terror. Then her body went still. And before I could reach her, Mom collapsed. Same house, same guests, different Alyssa. 2 weeks after Mom's collapse, Ethan told me it was time. The legal team had completed their review. The court filings were finalized, and the Monroe Trust had been reinstated under my name. But he wanted one final step, a public announcement. Closure. Justice. He said it had to happen where the lie began. Mom's house. My birthday. The same living room that once echoed with laughter at my expense. When I arrived, everything looked familiar but felt foreign. The pastel decorations, the faint smell of candles, and the same chandelier reflected a light that no longer hurt my eyes. Chloe stood by the table, wearing a smile too sharp to be polite. Grant looked like a man waiting for bad news he couldn't stop. The lawyer, Mr. Harlan, stood beside Ethan with a folder in his hand. Mom was seated quietly on the couch, pale but awake. The oxygen of denial had finally run out of this house. Mr. Harlan cleared his throat and addressed the room. On behalf of Monroe & Cross Holdings, we are here to confirm the rightful heir of the Monroe Trust. He paused, scanning the faces that once smirked at me. After months of verification, the board and the state registrar have recognized Miss Alyssa Monroe as the sole legal beneficiary. The words landed like thunder. Someone gasped. Someone else muttered that it had to be a mistake. Chloe's face drained of color, her hands gripping her glass until it cracked. Grant whispered something to her, but she pulled away. I didn't move. I just watched them the way they once watched me. Measured, silent, unflinching. Mr. Harlan continued, explaining the amount recovered, the restitution owed, and the criminal investigation pending for fraudulent transfers. His voice was steady, professional, but his eyes carried something close to pity when they turned toward my sister. Chloe's laughter came suddenly and sharply. So what now? You think this makes you better than me? I met her gaze. No, just equal. Finally. Her expression twisted, and for a moment she looked like a stranger, a woman who had spent her whole life performing control, and just realized the stage was burning. Mom began to cry softly. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, and she didn't push it away. I turned to the guests, the same relatives who once joined the jokes, the same neighbors who looked at me with pity. Now they looked away, pretending to check their phones. The silence felt cleaner this time. Mr. Harlan closed his folder and nodded to Ethan. That concludes the matter, Miss Monroe. Congratulations. Chloe stormed out, her heels cracking against the tile. Grant followed, phone already in hand, probably calling whatever lawyer would still take his case. Ethan waited until the room emptied before stepping closer. You did it, he said quietly. I exhaled, feeling the years of humiliation dissolve into something weightless. He hesitated, then reached for my hand. His voice softened, almost reverent. Your father wanted you to meet M for a reason. I looked up, breath caught in my throat. Before I could ask what he meant, his phone buzzed again. He read the screen, eyes darkening. We need to talk, he said. It's about him. Some gifts don't come wrapped. They walk through the door when you least expect them. A week after the hearing, Ethan asked me to meet him one last time. We met in my father's old studio, the room I'd avoided for years. Dust still covered the easel, brushes still sat in a coffee mug on the shelf, and sunlight cut through the blinds like thin gold ribbons across the floor. Ethan placed a small black box on the table between us. Inside was a letter sealed with wax, my father's initials pressed into the red stamp. My hand shook as I opened it. If you're reading this, it beg, and it means the people I loved lost their way. The handwriting was faint, shaky, but familiar. Each word felt like it was written directly to me. I built Monroe & Cross not for power, but for legacy. And I trusted Ethan's father because he believed in integrity over greed. If your mother or sister ever changes what's rightfully yours, Ethan has instructions to restore it. He knows how to protect what I built and who I built it for. I looked up. Ethan's expression was calm but heavy, like he'd been carrying this truth for years. Your father asked mine to promise that if anything happened, we'd protect you, he said. When my father died, that promise became mine. That's why I came to your party, Alyssa. He wanted you to know the truth when you were ready to see it. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. I thought about every insult, every dinner where I'd been treated like the outsider. All that pain had pushed me toward this moment, this truth. My father hadn't forgotten me. He'd planned for me to rise after they buried his name. I walked to the easel and uncovered one of his unfinished paintings. A sunrise over a quiet lake, brushstrokes soft, patient, unfinished. He'd left space, like he was waiting for someone else to complete it. I turned to Ethan. I'm not keeping all of it. He frowned slightly. What do you mean? I smiled. The first real one in years. My father built something good, and they tried to twist it into greed. I'm going to turn it back into what it was meant to be. The next week, I transferred part of the trust to my school's art program. New supplies, scholarships, and a community mural fund in my father's name. Watching the first group of students paint under the same morning light he once stood in felt like breathing again. For the first time, I wasn't defined by what I'd lost, but by what I'd chosen to create. Ethan stood beside me at the mural's unveiling, quiet and proud. The wall shimmered with color, hope, forgiveness, truth. I whispered softly, more to myself than anyone else. Family can break you or build you through truth. Never let mockery define your worth. And if you're still watching this store, remember, quiet hearts find their power when they finally stop apologizing for being loud with the truth. Subscribe for more stories where quiet hearts find their power.